When people talk with you for the first time, they're very nervous and they don't know how to approach you. And,
Right.
How do you make it easier for them?
Well, you know, like I sometimes even take advantage of that and become a little bit humorous on sometimes. Where
For example?
kids come up and say, "What happened?" And I say, "Cigarettes." And you know, the people around them start, you know, laughing. But I hug people. I was the Guinness Book of World Record holders for hugs in an hour. 1,749 hugs in an hour. My arms fell off, and someone beat me. So now we're going to go back and beat them back. But no, I love hugging. Hugging is my way of, obviously they try to shake hands. They say, "Don't worry, I don't shake hands, just give me a hug."
Nick Vujicic was born without arms or legs. Despite the many challenges this created for him growing up, he was able to overcome them all and credits his family's love, his faith in God, and his positive attitude for his success. Nick Vujicic, next on Long Story Short.
Long Story Short with Leslie Wilcox is Hawaii's first weekly television program produced and broadcast in high definition.
Aloha mai kako. I'm Leslie Wilcox. Nick Vujicic is a motivational speaker as well as a best-selling author, a Christian evangelist, and the leader of a nonprofit organization, Life Without Limbs. He's been an inspiration to audiences around the world, encouraging people to overcome obstacles and follow their dreams. But Nick was not always confident.
When you were born in Australia, did your parents know that you'd be born without limbs?
No, at the time they even had ultrasounds, and no one bothered to double check that I had my 10 fingers and 10 toes. And it was a shock. It was a tragedy. When I was laid by my mother's side, she said, "Take him away. I can't look at him right now." Full of emotion and questions. Why? Why did this happen? Couldn't we see this at least coming?
Later you would face all those questions. Why did this happen? But what was their thought process in dealing with it?
It was obviously difficult, and I knew that it would be someday that I would be able to hear it straight from them, and I felt like I had to be a teenager before I really went down that way. For you to hear from your own mother, "I couldn't hold you, I couldn't breastfeed you, I couldn't have peace about your existence and your purpose for at least 4 months," that was hard to hear. And so they took one day at a time, but my dad and mum were people of faith, believing that God does not make mistakes, even though it's hard to see how he is perfect when imperfect things happen. But one day at a time, loving each other and planting seeds of hope and encouragement. That's the only way that I got through my childhood. Going to school, getting bullied, they always were affectionate. They were very busy parents, but at the same time, they always made time to make sure that their son knew that he was beautiful and that he's not a mistake, and to do his best.
When you were a little kid, you wore prosthetic arms.
Yes, at 6 years old, we had state-of-the-art technology, 1989, actually made in Toronto, Canada. And they were very costly. Some people in Australia wanted to give me an opportunity, so they paid for it. And we're just so thankful for that. They were quite big. I was only a little guy. I was about 25 pounds at the time.
They came with shoulders and arms.
Shoulders and a whole harness thing, and the hand were rotating and the arms going up and down. But each arm weighed about 6 pounds. So it was quite heavy. And it stopped me from being so mobile. And then I had to sort of relearn how to write. So trying to write with my robotic arms means I had to move my whole body, and that didn't work. I felt a bit like RoboCop. And in me trying to accept myself, I had to accept myself the way that I was. So there was some psychology as well in that. But overall, it wasn't a benefit for me.
Would you tell us about your early years?
Yeah, basically, I first upfront say that I believe it's worse being in a broken home than having no arms, no legs. You can have arms and legs, but if your heart's broken, it's broken. If you're paralyzed by fear, you're disabled. And so it was difficult for me to believe in a greater hope. A man without vision dies. I didn't see a good vision for my life, and I started dying on the inside.
Even though you had loving parents and a
Even though I had
stable
a stable home. Imagine, I know what would have happened if I didn't have that. Because I actually was on the brink of giving up and trying to actually commit suicide.
When was that?
Age 10.
Age 10. What were you contemplating doing?
drowning myself in my bathtub, and I actually tried. I first thought of giving up at age 8. And I was thinking, well, maybe I can just jump off the countertop of the kitchen counter as I watched my mum cook. That was our sort of bonding session. And I thought to myself, I'm done. You know, all the bullying at school, all the teasing. My mum and dad don't know if I'm ever going to get married. I don't know if I'm going to be ever independent. If I don't have a purpose, what's the point? If my pain's not going to change, I want out. So at age 10, as I tried to drown myself, I thought of one image, and the image was my mother and my father crying at my grave, wishing they could have done something more. So I decided to stay just because of that. They didn't deserve that pain, so I stayed.
I think you were one of the first crop of young people to be mainstreamed through schools, and there you encountered bullying. What was the worst thing that happened to you in school?
You know, there is no pinnacle of my negative experience of bullying. And bullying is experienced by everyone, not just people in a wheelchair. So the problem for me was the taunts, the stares, the laughs were not just in school, but in every public setting. You couldn't get away from it. You can't ignore it. But there is no one worse thing. But people, you know, call me names, they make different jokes, and some I tried to ignore, some I confronted. There was one guy I did headbutt him.
It was an actual arranged fight outside the buildings of school?
So it was about this kid coming up to me and saying, I bet you can't fight. And you know me now, you know, trying to be confident. I said, I bet you I can. He said, well, how can you prove it? And I said, well, I'll meet you on the field at lunch. And there was about 20 of us there, and I never resort to violence since then. Fighting back is not the answer. If you need to self-defense, you know, self-defend yourself. If someone's really choking you and you don't have, you know, you gotta maybe get some self-defense classes, but we're not here to attack. And not to here to prove out, you know, how strong we are. And I was tempted and I took that fall, but I really didn't think he was gonna do it. I thought, how low can this guy be?
Exactly.
I went
calling out a guy in a wheelchair who, so how did it work out? He did actually call you out of your wheelchair, right?
So I said, well, you gotta, you know, he said, you gotta get out of your wheelchair. I'm like, okay. So I can't run him over.
Thought about it.
So I got to the field, and I said, you go on your knees, but he still had his hands. And you know, I wrestled with my brother and my sister, and I got a mean chin. I could get into their wrist, right to their bone, and they, you know, I felt like I got that move, but I didn't think this guy was going to.
But he had arms to.
He was pretty tall, so therefore long arms. Pushed me down once, and I'm like, man, is this guy for real? Is he really going to? Went up to him a second time, like walking up, and pushed me down again. And all the girls were like, oh, leave him alone. And the last thing I ever wanted was that. So I got up and I charged and I went straight into his nose. He flew back, blood came out.
So you hurled yourself at him.
Hurled myself at him, used my wheelchair to get back up, and I jumped quite, maybe 3 steps, 4 steps, but very fast. I used to be a lot faster when I was younger. And I said, I'm so sorry. And he just walked, and everyone was like, wow, you know. So imagine, first of all, my fear. I'm a PK, pastor's kid. I had to confess my sins to my parents, right? Like, Mom and Dad, I'm so sorry. I have to tell you.
I beat up a guy at school today.
I headbutted a guy at school, and blood came out of his nose. I'm so sorry. They didn't believe me. And they didn't smack me. They disciplined me. They used to discipline me that way with a belt. And I was ready for it. My parents did not spare the rod, and it was a way that they wanted to discipline us. That's how they grew up.
You got treated the same as your brother and sister?
Treated the same. I actually was probably the biggest bully out of all 3 of us. I dubbed my brother in for things that I did actually, and so I was pretty bad. I was sort of getting bossy sometimes. So that was the childhood Nick Vujicic. Not realizing that my brother's just loving me and he's helped me as much as he can just because he can and not because he's supposed to. And so there was some dynamics there, but my parents, you know, they gave us good discipline. You know, if they felt that was something to get us back on the straight and narrow, they did that. But I was very thankful that I did not get a smack. What do you mean you headbutted a kid? And so I didn't realize at the time that they just thought I was wanting attention by them. So I'm thankful that didn't happen, but I would never hit anyone ever again. I promised myself, because the guilt that I had. And I realized that, you know, people gossiping about me or laughing at me, I realized it's either ignorance or hurting people or hurting others ignorantly. And even the people who were bullying me that one day where I had 12 bullies pick on me, and they didn't know that I was being picked on that much, and I felt like I should give up. And one thing that helped me to get through it and even forgive them was believing that someone out there actually did love me outside of my family. And there was one girl who had no idea I was teased 12 times that day. I counted them all on my fingers. And she saw me across the playground on my way out of school. And she said, "Hey, Nick." And I'm like, "Great, here it is." She came up, she looked me right in the eye, and she said, "Nick, I just want you to know that you're looking good today." And I'm like, "Oh." So that's why I became a speaker.
Even though he decided that he wanted to become a speaker, Nick Vujicic had no idea what he would talk about or even where he would speak. He first had to survive the rest of his childhood.
Did you go through all of the angst of the questions that many people in difficult circumstances ask themselves? Why me? How could God do this to me? Why are people so cruel? How can I possibly survive? How can I provide for myself? How can I provide for a family? Can I have a family? How did you go through all of that?
It was a journey. At 13 years old, I actually hurt my foot playing soccer. So I have a foot that's about 6 inches long with 2 toes that allows me to type and walk and drive my wheelchair around and swim.
And balance?
And balance. I was in bed for 3 weeks, sprained my foot. 3 weeks being in bed for a 13-year-old is like 3 years. I felt disabled for the first time. I need my foot for everything, and I realized I need to be thankful for what I had instead of being angry about what I don't have. So I started counting my blessings. I said, "God, more than arms and legs, I need purpose. I need peace. I want heaven. Come into my heart, forgive me of my sin. And Lord, if you don't give me arms and legs," I have a pair of shoes in my closet just in case he does, "use me. If I don't get that miracle, use me so that others would know that greater than a physical healing, you need a spiritual healing. You need your soul restored." He doesn't need to change my physical aspect. He needs to change my heart, my mind, and really give me what I'm looking for, happiness through peace.
So you learned to have a positive attitude, but it took more than that, didn't it, to give you peace?
It did. It took time. It wasn't overnight. I have a positive attitude, not because that's my coping mechanism, but I found real hope, real happiness. And not in temporary things of what people think of you, or what job you're going to get, or what money you're going to have, and if you're not in a relationship. You need to be, first of all, taking responsibility of your own happiness and your own peace within you. And as you see that reflection in the mirror, one day at a time, which is, it's hard for someone to feel like they're ugly and then look themselves in the mirror and say, "I'm beautiful." But what I did when I looked myself in the mirror, I said, "Okay, Nick, you have no arms, no legs, but your eyes are beautiful. Hold on to something. Nick, you can't do sports, but you're good at mathematics. Give yourself a chance." I had a plan to become an accountant and financial planner, and curveballs are thrown at us every day.
What was your curveball?
A greater opportunity.
Oh.
That at the time, my parents thought I was crazy within. They never thought I'd be a speaker. They said, "What are you going to speak about?" I said, "I don't know." "Are they going to pay you?" "I don't know." "Do you have any invitations?" "No." "How are you going to get them?" "I don't know." "How are you going to get there?" "I don't know." But when you find the truth that every day is an opportunity, you take one day at a time, not just about what we can get and what we can have, but even the curveballs that come negatively at you, remember the last obstacle you went through, how hard it was, how big it looked, how fearful you were. You still got through it. Maybe you don't even know how you got through it, but you're still here. If you're still here, there's an opportunity to grow. And if you live in tomorrow, you can do better than today. Whatever your goal is, find your real purpose, eternal purpose, and make sure that love is the thing that covers it all. One of my first big speeches, I was in front of 300 teenagers, sophomore students, for 7 minutes. I had no idea what to do. My palms are sweaty. And within 3 minutes, did you get that? Palms sweaty?
Yes.
And within 3 minutes, half the girls were crying, and one girl in the middle of the room started weeping. She put up her hand. She said, "I'm so sorry to interrupt. Can I come up there and give you a hug?" She came and she hugged me. She cried on my shoulder and she said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you. No one's ever told me that they love me. No one's ever told me that I'm beautiful the way that I am." That's when I knew that hope was real as a way to uplift others. That even though I never got some miracles, that I could still be a miracle for one other soul.
Nick Vujicic was 19 when he gave this speech. Since then, he has traveled the world, meeting everyone from world leaders to the impoverished, sharing his story of hope with millions of people.
When teenagers see me up on stage, so 18 schools in Hawaii over the 2 weeks that we had, every time I get up there, they're like, "Oh, is it going to make me feel sorry for him? Is it a depressing thing?" And as I get up there and just break the ice, they're like, "Wow, this guy's pretty cool." So,
Yeah, lots of things in your mind as a public speaker as you approach a group.
yes, definitely. And I have still a lot to learn. But one thing you want everyone to be is at ease with whatever message you have. And the greatest message of all that you could ever communicate is hope. So that's what we try and impart.
Do you ad lib or do you have a prepared text?
I don't have a prepared text. After speaking 2,600 times, meeting 12 presidents and speaking at 7 congresses in total, you sort of have just this faith that I'm getting up there and I know my story, I know the principles and values of my faith, and get up there and talk about Jesus in some settings and in places where I cannot talk about my faith. We talk about never giving up and dreaming big and knowing that everyone's beautiful. So,
What are those places where you can't speak of your faith?
there are some times in different regions of the world, and for instance, China. China is an open country for me to go there, and the cool thing about it is if someone asks me about my faith, then I can definitely share about my faith. Mm-hmm. And so in every speech that we've had with 40,000 students in university campuses, there was a time about 5-6 years ago where a lot of kids were giving up, jumping off buildings, and they asked me to go and speak at the university. It was just a pressure to perform, and the global economic crisis started getting everyone worried. Well, is there a job for me at the end of this? Mm-hmm. And suicide rates dropped immediately, 80%. And so they put me on TV to 40 million households. To the Arab world, we had a press conference in Egypt, 2008, with the governor of Alexandria. And 200 million Arabs were watching. And someone mentioned about their faith, and they sort of asked me to talk about mine. And so we come in love, no matter what. And that's the greatest thing we want. I work with Buddhists, I work with Muslims, I work with all people who want to make a difference in the world. So I don't just work with Christians.
You hear many other people's really sad stories of affliction, of injury, of abuse, as you mentioned, and they're looking to you for answers. But sometimes people can't hear your answer.
It's true. So many of us are deafened by the fear screaming at us, the echoes of everyone's taunts in our bed at night. I want them to know that they're first of all beautiful and they're here for a reason and they're not a mistake. Just because you failed something 100 times or 100,000 times, you're not a failure. You got to stand strong and finish strong. It's not about what happens to you, it's what you do with it.
You talk about do not fear, fight your fears. And one of the most common fears in the world is the fear of public speaking, which you have managed to do fearlessly.
Well, first of all, the greatest fear is public speaking. Second one is fear of death. So some people would rather die before they speak, right? So it's pretty funny. But I love speaking. I'm not afraid of death, but I don't overcome all my fears. You can't ignore fear. F-E-A-R, false evidence appearing real. That's the irrational fear, the stupid thoughts that come into you that never come true. Don't let that take over. Hold on to the rational fear, the things that you have to think through, the things that have to get through, but don't let fear disable you.
But when you go up there, if you sense the crowd may not be with you from the start, how do you get them on your side?
Well, first, don't use your fingers to fix your hair, because that never works. No, look, for me, after speaking so many times, it was sort of after the 500th speaking engagement that I had, that you started to really learn to really even critique yourself while you're up there and read the crowd. I've now done 2,600 speaking engagements in crowds as large as 110,000. And so talk about, knees shaking. So I go up there sometimes, still a little nervous sometimes, but I see that more as adrenaline. And I have people pray for me. But basically, be real. Your crowd knows exactly when you're not real. And if you're authentic and you have something good to say, and you have something that's applicable, simple, relevant, and it changes something, great, go for it in a good way. So hold on to those simple ways in how to live life. So because the most simple things that we can communicate are the most effective.
My guess is that you're good at reading people because you've had a chance to observe them from your wheelchair when you're a kid, and now you've been exposed to lots of different types of people. Is that so? Can you read people well?
I think I can. Is that you kicking me under the table? No, look, I'm thankful that I can look people in the eyes, and I'm just a channel. I'm not any greater human being than anyone on the planet. I'm not. We're all equal. And so, I just want to try to communicate love. And in that compassion that I have for everyone, because I needed that love once myself. Now knowing that I could be the hands and feet of love and hope, I always try to see if there's anything that I could say that might bring a smile to their face, or a comforting hug, or an encouraging word. And that's life. That's the cool part of life. You can be a light in a darkened place.
There was a time in your life when you were, when throngs of people were just loving your talks and wanting to be with you and talk with you, but you still felt alone because you didn't have a special relationship. How did that feel? What was that like?
If you're not happy single, you're not going to be happy married. I did not need a wife. Did I still want to be married? Absolutely. And God knew the desire of my heart. But I had to come to a point in my relationship with Jesus to say, God, if you want me single for the rest of my life, I will still serve you and I'll still worship you. But if you do have that person out there for me, help me to know who that is.
Tell us about your romance.
We met at a small speaking engagement. Basically, as soon as my wife and we laid eyes on each other, it was like fireworks everywhere. And I felt and I saw that she saw them too.
Your wife looks like a local girl because she's what we call a Hapahauli, I guess. Well, she's Mexican Japanese.
Yes, Japsican.
And you have a son. You wouldn't discipline your own child in the way your parents disciplined you?
My kid's not disciplined yet. He's only 1. No, I don't think we'd use a belt. But every now and then, it's going to have to be in my wife because I can't do anything. But we're going to have to take it as it comes. No formula. That's what we're trying to do. We want the most with love and words.
I like what you did in one of your books. You talked about how to develop a positive attitude.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you the negative, and then you tell me what you say is the positive way to look at it.
We got an exam here. Now listen, I wrote this 3 years ago on that one.
Okay. I'll never get over this.
One day I will somehow with someone.
I can't take this anymore.
You got through yesterday. Just do better than yesterday and you'll get through today.
This is the worst I've ever had it.
There's worse coming, but you're stronger from yesterday's trials. Take one day at a time. This too shall pass.
I'll never find another job.
Yes, you will. And even if you don't, your value is not determined on how much money you bring to the table. And your love communicated to your sons and daughters are not how much you can prepare them for the greatest university. My son doesn't love me for what university he can go to. My son knows that I love him because I tell him every day, and he's too young to know that yet. But every day I tell my wife she's beautiful. Every day I'll tell my children they're beautiful and I love them too. That's how they know how much they love me and how much I love them.
Nick Vujicic, who now lives in Los Angeles, travels around the world, inspiring others to believe that they too can overcome serious challenges. Mahalo to Nick Vujicic for sharing his stories of hope and faith with us. And mahalo to you for joining us. For PBS Hawaii and Long Story Short, I'm Leslie Wilcox. Ahui ho.
For audio and written transcripts of all episodes of Long Story Short with Leslie Wilcox, visit pbshawaii.org. To download free podcasts of Long Story Short with Leslie Wilcox, go to the Apple iTunes Store or visit pbshawaii.org.
How do you approach life daily? I believe you have a caregiver who travels with you.
Yeah, we have some caregivers who travel with me. As a teenager, I learned how to become independent. I could brush my teeth, comb my hair, shower myself.
Okay, how do you do that?
So I have an electric toothbrush, and on a suction cup, there is a cup that holds my electric toothbrush. I can turn it on with my shoulder. There's a standalone tube of toothpaste, and I push it down with my tooth, and then toothpaste comes out, and I go and I move it around and use my cheeks and lips to put some pressure on the brush while I move it all around. There was no training, no templates. It was really hard.
Oh,
but
that's
anything,
terrific.
whether we shampooed my hair or turned on the taps or even personal hygiene, it was all about trial and error. And so that's the greatest principle of life. Sometimes you have to learn through your own experiences. I wish I could learn from other people more, but that's how life is.